Gaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Gopi Jana Balabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Balabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Balabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Balabha Girivardhari Jasodanandana Vratajanarandana Nandana Vratajanarandana Jasodanandana Vratajanarandana Yamuna Kiravana Chadi Jamana Tiravanam Chadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabihari Madhava Kunjabihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabihari Madhava Kunjabihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jasodanandana Vratajanarandana Jasodanandana Vratajanarandana Jamana Kiravanam Chari Jamana Kiravanam Chari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabihari Madhava Kunjabihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabihari Jaya Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivajagacharya Astatara Satasi Srimad His Divine Grace Sri Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Gaura Premanandi Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We're continuing. Oh, there she is, our hostess. We're continuing with Chaitanya Bhagavata, and it's a very happy chapter. Nimai gets married. That's if you like marriages. Very happy. Shri and Bhu, known by Vishnupriya and Laksmipriya, the Lord's internal potency. He was 16 when he was married. And she was some years younger. I don't know the number of years younger, but quite young when they were married. This is Vedic procedure. And it has a lot to do with the anxiety, loving anxiety of Mother Sachi having lost so many daughters, and then her elder son, and then her husband, and all that's left, shelter-wise, was Nimai. Of course, she was filled with joy to be with Nimai. She forgot her sorrow of all the other things because of Nimai. But she wanted to see that Nimai would be properly settled in marriage, and a matchmaker came along and made the arrangement. And it's a big deal in Vedic culture. And what to speak of transcendental connection between the two, the Lord and his consort. All glories to Sri Gaurachandra, the Lord of all lords. All glories to Sri Nityananda, Nityananda's beloved Lord, who possesses an eternal form. All glories to the Lord of Govinda, the doorkeeper. O Lord, please glance mercifully upon all living entities. All glories to Jagannath's son, Jagannath Mishra, the king of the Brahmanas. All glories to all of your devotees. All glories to the lotus-eyed Lord, who is an ocean of mercy. O Lord, please bless me, that my mind may be absorbed in your glories. My dear brothers, please listen to the topics of Sri Chaitanya in this Adi Kanda, wherein the description of the Lord's scholastic pastimes are found. In this way, Sri Gaura Sundara engaged day and night in his studies while residing in Navadvip. After performing his morning rites, the Lord of Tridasha went to school along with his classmates. The Lord would sit in Gangadas's class and continually engage in debate. The Lord would always defeat the arguments of anyone who disagreed with his explanations. After class, the Lord sat in the midst of his friends to discuss subjects further. Murari Gupta did not care to sit in the Lord's discussions. Therefore, the Lord desired to confront him. Nimai wore his cloth like a sannyasi, and he sat in the virasana posture. He was smeared with sandalwood pulp and decorated with tilak. The effulgence of his beautiful teeth condemned that of a string of pearls. In his fresh youth, at the age of 16, Sri Gauranga's beauty captivated even Cupid. In knowledge, he surpassed Brahaspati, the spiritual master of the demigods. He would tease those who studied on their own. The Lord challenged, quote, "Let us see who is intelligent enough to refute my conclusions. Some students don't even know the rules of conjunctions, yet they are satisfied to study on their own. Thus, they eventually become fools because they do not take help from someone in knowledge." Hearing Nimai's provocative statement, Murari Gupta did not say anything, but went on with his work. Although the Lord was pleased that his servant remained silent, he nevertheless continued to challenge him. He said, "Oh, doctor," because that's the occupation of Gupta, is Vaidya. "Oh, doctor, why are you studying here? You should go gather some leaves and herbs to cure the sick. The literatures on grammar are most difficult to understand, and they do not mention anything about mucus, bile, and indigestion. What will you learn by studying on your own? Better you go home and treat the sick." Murari Gupta, by nature, most harsh because he is an expansion of Lord Rudra. Still, he did not become angry at Vishwambar. He replied, "Dear respected sir, why are you so proud? Why do you challenge everyone? Have you asked me about a sutra vritti panji or tika and not received a reply? Have you not asked me, yet you claim that I don't know anything? You are a respected Brahmana, so what can I say?" The Lord said, "So, tell me what you learned today." Then as Murari began to explain, the Lord began to refute him. Murari would give one explanation and the Lord would give another. Yet neither the master nor the servant could defeat the other. By the mercy of the Lord, Murari Gupta was a great scholar. The Lord was pleased, therefore, to hear his explanations in satisfaction. The Lord touched Murari's body with his lotus hand, and Murari became filled with ecstasy. Murari Gupta thought, "He is certainly not an ordinary person. Can an ordinary person possess such knowledge? Just by his touch, my body was filled with ecstasy. Why should I be embarrassed to study under him? In all of Navadvip, there is no one more intelligent than him." Feeling satisfied in this way, the great doctor said, "Listen, Vishwambar, from now on, I will study under you." After this pleasing exchange between the Lord and his servant, Nimai and his friends went to take bath in the Ganges. After finishing his bath, the Lord went home. Thus, the Supreme Lord enjoyed the life of a student. The Lord opened his school at the house of the most fortunate Mukunda Sanjay. His son, Purushottam Sanjay, became the Lord's student. He also had great devotion for the Lord. There was a large Chandi Mandap in the courtyard of his house. That hall had the capacity to hold many students. Lord Gauranga, the king of the Brahmanas, used to divide his students in groups and teach them in that hall. Nimai would give various explanations and refutations as he continually derided the other teachers. The Lord said, "In the age of Kali, who doesn't even know the rules of conjunctions is still given the title Bhattacharya. Let them refute my explanations. Then I will accept them as Bhattacharyas and Mishras." In this way, the Lord of Vaikuntha sportingly enjoyed his life as a scholar, yet none of his servants could recognize him. When Mother Sachi saw her son's first symptoms of maturity, she began to make plans for his marriage. There was one qualified Brahmana in Navadvip named Balabhacharya, who was equal to Janak Maharaj. He had a daughter who appeared to be the personification of Lakshmi. That Brahmana was constantly searching for a qualified husband for her. By providence, one day, when Lakshmi went to take bath in the Ganges, Gaurachandra was there at the same time. Gaurachandra smiled when he recognized his beloved Lakshmi, and Lakshmi mentally offered her obeisances to the Lord's lotus feet. After recognizing each other in this way, they both returned to their homes. Who can understand the pastimes of Lord Gaurasundara? By the Lord's will, that very day, a Brahmana named, who knows the name of the matchmaker? Vanamali, the celebrated person in Gauralila, Vanamali, the matchmaker, went to the house of Mother Sachi. That respected Brahmana offered Mother Sachi his obeisances, and she respectfully offered him a seat. Vanamali Acharya then asked Sachi, "Why aren't you thinking about arranging your son's marriage?" In Navadvip resides one Balabhacharya, who was born in an exalted family. He is pure, well-behaved, and decorated with many good qualities. He has a daughter whose beauty, qualities, and temperament are as good as Lakshmi. If you wish, I'll arrange their marriage. Mother Sachi replied, "My son is fatherless. Leave him alone to study for some time. Later I will consider." The Brahmana was not satisfied with Sachi's answer and therefore left disappointed. As he left, by providence, he met Gaurachandra, who happily embraced him. The Lord inquired, "Tell me, where have you been?" The Brahmana replied, "I was speaking with your mother. I offered her a proposal for your marriage, but for some reason I don't understand, she refused." Hearing his words, Nimai remained silent for a moment. He then smiled and spoke a little more with the Brahmana before returning to his house. When the Lord got home, he asked his mother, "Why didn't you respect the Brahmana's proposal?" Mother Sachi was pleased to receive an indication from her son the next day. She called the Brahmana to her home. Sachi said, "O Brahmana, I've decided that you may immediately arrange what you proposed yesterday." The Brahmana took the dust from Mother Sachi's feet and immediately left for the house of Vallabhacharya. On seeing the Brahmana, Vallabha offered him a seat with great respect. Vanamali Acharya said, "Please hear me. Choose an auspicious day for the marriage of your daughter. The son of Jagannath Rishra, Sri Vishrambar, is highly learned in an ocean of good qualities. This great personality is the proper match for your daughter. Now you decide what you would like to do." Vallabhacharya joyfully replied, "Such a husband for my daughter is achieved by great fortune. If Krishna is pleased with me and Lakshmi and Parvati are pleased with my daughter, if Krishna is pleased with me and Lakshmi and Parvati are pleased with my daughter, then I will be blessed with such a husband for my daughter. You may arrange everything without delay. But I have one request that I'm embarrassed to disclose. I am poor and have no means to offer a dowry. I can offer only 5 Hari Taki fruits. Along with my daughter, please beg their consent." Hearing the words of Vallabha Mishra, Vanamali Acharya happily completed all the formalities. He then returned to Mother Sachi's house and informed Mother Sachi, "The formalities have been completed. Now you may choose an auspicious time for the ceremony." When the Lord's relatives heard the news, they joyfully began to make arrangements. On an auspicious day, they held the Adivas ceremony, during which people danced and sang, while musicians played various instruments. All around, the Brahmanas recited Vedic hymns, as Nimai, the jewel of the twice-born, appeared like a moon in their midst. At an auspicious moment, the relatives and Brahmanas offered sandalwood pulp and flower garlands to the Lord, thereby completing the Adivas ceremony. The relatives also satisfied the Brahmanas by offering them sandalwood pulp, betel nuts, and flower garlands. Following tradition, Vallabhacharya also came and joyfully took part in the Adivas ceremony. After Nimai woke the next morning, he took bath, gave charity, and respectfully worshipped his forefathers. Auspicious sounds of singing, dancing, and musical instruments filled the atmosphere. Everywhere excited people were calling out, "Take this, give that." Many chaste women, well-wishers, friends, and respected Brahmanas graced the function. Mother Sachi happily satisfied the ladies with puffed rice, bananas, vermilion, betel, and oil. Demigods and their wives took form as of humans and also happily attended the Lord's marriage. Vallabhacharya joyfully worshipped the demigods and forefathers according to Vedic injunctions. At an auspicious time at dusk, the Lord arrived at the house of Vallabhacharya. As soon as the Lord arrived, Vallabhacharya and associates drowned in an ocean of bliss. He then respectfully offered a seat to his son-in-law and welcomed him according to Vedic injunctions. Vallabhacharya had his beautifully decorated daughter brought before the Lord. Everyone began to chant the names of Hari as they lifted Lakshmi off the ground. Then Lakshmi was carried around Nimai 7 times. As they placed her before him, she offered him obeisances with folded hands. As they finally exchanged flower garlands, Lakshmi and the original Narayan were both greatly pleased. After Lakshmi offered flower garlands at the feet of the Lord, she offered him obeisances with full surrender. All that could be heard was the ecstatic chanting of all glories to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Hari. In this way, after they performed the ceremony of seeing each other's face for the first time, the Lord sat down with Lakshmi on his left. The Lord's fresh, youthful body defeated that of Cupid, as Lakshmi then sat at his left side. Who has the ability to describe that wonderful scene and the happiness that was experienced at the home of Vallabha Mishra? At last, Vallabhacharya, who is not different from Bhishmaka, who is Bhishmaka's daughter, Rukmini, who is none other than Bhishmaka, sat down to give away his daughter. After duly offering his daughter to the Lord, the Brahmana became absorbed in an ocean of bliss, the same lotus feet that are worshipped by Shankara and Brahma to obtain power of creation were now worshipped by the respected Brahmana Vallabhacharya. He then also decorated the body of the Lord with cloth, flower garlands, and sandalwood pulp. After duly offering his daughter to the Lord, the Brahmana became absorbed in an ocean of bliss. Thereafter, the chaste women performed the various traditional family rituals. That night, the Lord stayed at the home of Vallabhacharya, and the next day he returned home with Lakshmi. As the Lord and Lakshmi were carried home in a palanquin, people came running out of their house to see them. Both Lakshmi and the original Narayan were wonderfully decorated with sandalwood paste, flower garlands, ornaments, crowns, and bright cudgel. Everyone who saw them exclaimed, "How wonderful!" The ladies were all particularly amazed. Someone said, "They exactly resemble Shiva and Parvati. They must have worshipped the Lord without duplicity for a long time. Can a less fortunate girl possibly get such a nice husband? I conclude that they are Shiva and Parvati." Someone else said, "They resemble Indra and Sachi, Madan and Rati." One girl said, "They are Lakshmi and Narayan." Another girl said, "By their unparalleled beauty, it appears that Sita and Ram are seated on that palanquin." In this way, the girls spoke in various ways as they joyfully watched Lakshmi and the original Narayana. When the couple arrived at Nimai's house in the evening, they were festively greeted by dancing, singing, and the playing of musical instruments. Sachi Devi, with some other Brahmana ladies, then jubilantly welcomed her daughter-in-law home. Thereafter, Mother Sachi satisfied the Brahmanas, musicians, and dancers with money cloth and sweet words. Whoever hears these auspicious topics of the Lord's marriage is never entangled in worldly life. Hearing about marriage means you'll not be entangled in worldly life, because it's transcendental, right? With Lakshmi at the side of the Lord, the house of Sachi appeared like Vaikuntha, the most effulgent abode. Such a wonderful effulgence constantly emanated from the house that Mother Sachi could not even see properly. Sometimes Sachi saw flames of fire at the side of her son, but when she looked again, they were gone. When she sometimes smelled the fragrance of a lotus flower, she was utterly astonished. Sachi thought, "I can understand the reason for this. This girl is a plenary portion of Lakshmi Devi. That is why I see this effulgence and smell the fragrance of lotus flowers. Now we may not face any poverty like before. Otherwise, where has everything come from since this daughter-in-law Lakshmi entered my house?" In this way, Mother Sachi had various thoughts as the Lord almost, but not quite, manifest himself. Who can understand the supreme will of the Lord? And when he does, he performs his pastime. How and when does he perform his pastimes? Until the Lord himself allows one to know him, Even Lakshmi has no power to understand him. 2 more verses. The Vedas, Puranas, and other scriptures confirm that only one who is favored by the Lord can understand him, accepting Sri Chaitanya and Nityananda Prabhu as my life and soul, I, Vrindavan Das, sing the glories of their lotus feet. And that's the chapter. Later on, when the Lord is traveling for various purposes, she dies out of separation. And Mother Sachi's bereft, and so another marriage is performed, and the second marriage is very, 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 very elaborate and opulent, and Chandrasekhar Acharya is the benefactor that takes care of all that. For those of you that have been to Vrindavan, you know where the birthplace of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is. And from our ISKCON temple going down the road, there's Srivasanga, the birthplace of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, which means the house of Jagannath Mishra. And further down is where the Chaitanya Gaudiya Math, the headquarters of Bhaktisiddhanta, was. And that's where the house of Chandrasekhar was. So Chandrasekhar, we hear about him later, after Lord Chaitanya accepted sannyas. Where did he go? No. When Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was traveling on his way to Vrindavan, he stayed at the home of Chandrasekhar Acharya and Tapan Mishra. So by that time, after he had taken sannyas, he moved to Benares. And, he got his Lord Chaitanya's association there. But he was wealthy. So sometimes Brahmanas were very poor, and that we heard earlier. Jagannath Mishra was also poor, and although the daughter of Vallabhacharya was Lakshmi, the goddess of fortune herself, he was also poor. So sometimes Brahmanas were poor. Sometimes the Brahmanas were wealthy. Chandrasekhar was wealthy. And, the second marriage was fantastic. But then it was, she unfortunately was left behind when he accepted sannyas. So all of these 2 marriages, it's quite unique. And in terms of leelas of the personality of Godhead, that the consort of the personality of Godhead dies. Pretty unique in past times. Not totally unheard of that someone for some reason leaves their body after marriage. But she died of separation. And then he remarried. And then took sannyas. And that's quite amazing, Leela-wise also. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, it becomes connected with his beloved consort and takes sannyas. Is there any other such Leela? And the intention of his accepting sannyas was, it's repeatedly expressed. He was thinking there's the external. His students were criticizing him because they didn't understand his mood of ecstatic love for Krishna. And therefore they were considering him to be a worldly person. Lord Chaitanya was considering this is a big offense. And because at least the culture of honoring a sannyasi is there is still part of the culture of the time. If I take sannyas, they'll honor me instead of criticize me. So there'll be that to their benefit. And then another external reason is, I came into this world to deliver the holy name, so I should take sannyas and travel and preach, which he did, but he stayed so much time in Puri, so there was another reason to stay in Puri. Enter into another mood besides the mood of a Brahmana Grahastha. Anyway, the pastimes of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu are very profound. Very, very deep. Very, very deep. So we're just touching on the verses to get a sense of the flow of the pastimes. It's something like reading, some people like reading the entire Srimad Bhagavatam, beginning to end, just the verses. And it's nice to get a sense of the flow of the verses. It's a whole other thing to get a sense of the meaning of the verses. The commentary is so rich. Bhaktisiddhanta's commentary on Chaitanya Bhagavata is also very rich, just like Prabhupada's commentary on Chaitanya Bhagavata. So very rich. But the pastimes themselves carry potency. Just like Vrindavan Das continuously says, when he hears these, they're on their way to the spiritual world. But he repeatedly also says to understand. He goes on explaining, but where's the limit of explaining? He explains some things, but how can you explain fully? Who can understand the extent of the good fortune, or who can understand these pastimes, etc., etc.? In principle, he's giving mercy. And how he gives mercy is also mysterious, because why this instead of that, and so forth. Hare Krishna. We saved a mat for you. You like being way out there, or you want to come in? There's be socially distanced. You just sit on one of those mats there and you're in good shape. Okay. So we just finished the reading. It was the marriage of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to Vishnupriya, Laksmipriya, excuse me. And the whole introduction and Vanamali and the matchmaker and the father he mentioned specifically Bhishmaka, the first queen that Krishna married. Rukmini's father was Bhishmaka. How deep and how profound were these associates of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that while understanding his Leela, they also understood his spiritual identity, just like repeatedly in this chapter several times, he's the original Narayan. And here's original Narayan getting, being introduced to his eternal associate. What a pastime. Meeting and separation. And they understood who, to some extent at least, they understood who's who. there's a description later on in Chaitanya Bhagavata where Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has some interaction with Suklambar Brahmachari. Suklambar Brahmachari was Sudama Brahman in Krishna Lila. And Shuklambar Brahmachari had this practice. He was considered by worldly people to be a beggar. He had a bag, and he would go, doing madhukari door to door. So he was disrespected by the materialists, but he was a highly advanced Vaishnav. So there's some pastime described without going into detail. It's really amazing. But Lord Chaitanya insisted one time that he wanted to go to the home of Shuklambar Brahmachari. And Shuklambar Brahmachari had like a shanty. He was poor. He was a beggar. He had no, something like, but not quite the same as Kolavechar Sridhar, very, very poor. So he wanted to come to his home. He went to his home. And he brought all kinds of other devotees with him. And he had nothing because he was so poor. And the advice that Shuklambar Brahmachari received was, you just bring the ingredients, because all the ingredients were two things, rice and tamarind. Tamarind chutney and rice. You cook, just put everything ready in the kitchen and Lakshmi will come and cook it. The goddess of fortune will come and cook it. And that's what happened, much to his astonishment. And after everyone had kirtan and so forth and so on, everyone was fed. Right there, on the floor, on the ground, because there's no house, just a little shed or shanty, they took rest. And one devotee who was the one who wrote for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Vijay, took rest next to Lord Chaitanya. Lord Chaitanya, when they were resting, he rolled over and his hand touched the shoulder of Vijay, who woke up. And then this amazing vision happened where he saw a column rise into the air and it was decorated with jewels, and it was, Lord Chaitanya gave him a vision of some, his opulences. And he went mad. And Lord Chaitanya then said, he started to call out loudly. Lord Chaitanya put his hand over his mouth and then told him, don't disclose this to anyone until after I depart this world. And he was then bottled up. He couldn't disobey Lord Chaitanya, but he was experiencing ecstasy. So he got up and started. He didn't disclose what happened, but he was just going around like a madman, and everyone thought he had become mad. And for days, something like a week, he just was walking around, not eating, not sleeping, just just processing what his experience was. But one of the previous times when visiting Shuklambar Brahmachari's home, Lord Chaitanya snatched some of the broken rice from his bag that he had gotten from here and there, and he tried to check Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, very similar to the Sudama Brahman pastime. But Lord Chaitanya insisted that he ate something like what he did with Raghunath Das. So the pastimes are loving exchanges in a transcendental way that the Leela itself, what's using the conventional term, what's the takeaway from all this? There's another reality, the reality of loving exchange with the personality of Godhead, and our life is meant for that. And, while we're carrying out our worldly duties, etc., 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 there's another reality, and our life is meant for that other reality. And we live our lives according to duties properly performed, and our hearts should become attracted to this other reality that's meant for the human form of life. And Lord Chaitanya's pastimes are like that. And the narrator of Chaitanya Bhagavata is Vrindavan Das, and that's where he is. That's where his consciousness is. And it's, faithless persons probably aren't interested, or worse, they're critical of this sentimentalist, etc., etc. He doesn't have his feet on the ground. And people that are attracted to that also don't. Where's the practicality of all this? I'm mentioning this because I was at a home a couple weeks ago, and one college student who's in a medical practice of some kind was sitting listening. Grew up in a devotee family, mother and father, nice devotees. And he was just listening, and, I'm a practical person. What's the takeaway from all of this? Because we were also reading Chaitanya Bhagavata in similar fashion, anticipating Gaur Purnima. While carrying out the duties of life, it's important to carry them out responsibly and properly and dutifully and carefully and all those good things, religiously, honestly, and the higher mission of human life, the actual mission of human life, is not just prosperity, dharma, artha, kama. It's beyond moksha. It's the love of God stage. And these literatures are meant to illumine us, enlighten us, and lift us to that stage. That's the takeaway. It's not on the material side. The material side, all the duties were observed, the rituals, this and that, and this procedure, that procedure, and everything was paka. But there's a higher reality. And how fortunate were these associates that understood. And many of them didn't understand. It was repeated here. That his friends didn't understand, the teachers didn't understand, the parents didn't understand. They were just like Krishna's Leela in Vrindavan. They didn't understand his divinity, but the narrators understood his divinity and periodically touch upon his divinity in the midst of telling this wonderful story of his past loving exchanges. The Rasika part. The first, these narrations have the effect of lifting one's consciousness to transcendence. When great acharyas speak philosophy, it also has the potency to lift one's consciousness into transcendence. So whether it's Leela or teachings, the goal is transcendence. When however many people read the different volumes of the Harry Potter story, did they reach transcendence? I didn't read any of it, but apparently the author was really gifted and as a writer, and it was very enchanting. You read the book and you can't put it down. You just go through it, and it's like, wow, you're absorbed in this other world of whatever the Harry Potter story is. But it doesn't lift you to transcendence. It's, very interesting, very intricate, very, who did it to whom, and solve the mystery and get you intrigued, go on to the next volume. but no transcendence at all. And with this literature, the stories are really far out, but the result is you're left in a space of transcendence. If you listen attentively and carefully, there's spiritual potency within these narrations. That's the takeaway. And remind us of, in one way, what's really important in life is the loving exchanges, and that's the real purpose of our human mission. And if we miss it, it's a big loss. So let's see if there's some discussion with these Chaitanya Bhagavata readings. There's generally the discussion level goes down compared to topics that are more philosophical. But let's see what happens.
When these personalities
keep speaking, he'll fix it.
Talking about, say, protection for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu or giving him blessings, typically they invoke Narayan. So was it because it's the custom during that time, or is there any specific reason for that?
Well, the specific reason is most of them are Vaishnavas, but there were some in their association apparently who are not just Vaishnavas, like Shaivites or Durga worshippers, because some of that appears here and there. So my sense is it has to do with, emphasis has to do with who the speakers are, and Vrindavadas is just reflecting, the social mix of, the people of that time, because he knew, because he was from that time. He's just reflecting what the reality of the makeup of the social mix was. But most of them were Vaishnavas, or were certainly becoming Vaishnavas by Lord Chaitanya's association.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Guru Maharaj, I was observing that in each and every Leela of the Lord, and in Ram Leela and Krishna Leela and then Lord Chaitanya's, there is this opulence of the Lord, this all renounced is exhibited.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. So I was just thinking, now, is there any significance that in devotional service that one has to come to that stage?
We don't have opulence. He in each of those three forms of the Lord. Now, there's degrees. Ramchandra exhibited more opulence, and but from time to time they would exhibit their opulence. I mean, we can think of some examples: building a bridge across the ocean, or firing an arrow through the salt trees and then went into the earth and then back into his quiver. So he would show his opulence from time to time, super opulence. However, largely amongst forms of the Lord, these three are specifically human-like. And that's part of the charm, is they're human-like, not just always opulence, or some kind of extreme form that, what's this? Lord Nrsingadev or Varaha or whatever. So something quite extraordinary. They seemed somewhat human-like, but sometimes showed their opulence. And then that display of opulence would strike the hearts of different people in different ways, depending on their relationship. So your question specifically is, how does this have some impact on us as devotees? it depends on our hearts. In the beginning stages, confirmation that he's God. Like, someone says, I'm God. Can you lift Govardhan Hill? Can you show your universal form? Can you show your opulences? Then how can you say you're God? How can I accept that you're God? So it's asserting divinity, but how that impacts us depends on our regard. It's to help us be reassured. He's really the personality of Godhead. He's not just like, a far out person, expanding himself into 16,000 forms, etc., etc., etc. Does that address your question? Are you thinking about how do we see the Lord's opulences, or how do we see our own?
Yeah, I was thinking unless until we are detached, there is no possibility of experiencing the transcendence, or?
I'm not, say it again?
Unless until we are detached, we are not, there is no possibility of experiencing the transcendence.
Unless we're detached, we won't experience transcendence.
Yeah, is that right?
We'll see it you'll see. It depends on how you mean your question. Attachments can be subtle or gross. It's just thinking now, say, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. But he had to let go of pride before the Lord revealed his spiritual identity, because he couldn't see it otherwise. Or he could see it fully when he was detached from pride. So that was the first order business. In King Prataparudra, he was opulent but not attached to his opulence. He was ready to just give it up if it meant he can't have association with the Lord. But, he was being further purified and further purified and further purified to get Lord Chaitanya's mercy in different stages and ways. So, he was detached, but he didn't have the same understanding of the personality of Godhead. He heard from Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, this isn't just, an elevated sannyasi. He's the Supreme Lord. King Prataparudra was so faithful to Sarvabhauma. He said, just by your saying this, I accept it. So can you grant an audience, arrange an audience? No. Your question is coming from our morning discussions, isn't it? The Uddhava Gita topic that we're discussing, the detachment in order to experience transcendence. I think it just, in general, that's the case. And Krishna can make exceptions without difficulty. Or Chaitanya Mahaprabhu can make exceptions without difficulty. Anything else? You have something more?
Maharaj, one of the verses was mentioning that Murari Gupta was a representation of Lord Rudra. Is there any details to that?
I'd have to look at the commentary. Perhaps there's something in the commentary. I don't have that with me. I'll check for tomorrow. I was wondering the same thing. Because my understanding was Murari Gupta's Hanuman. or in the mood of Hanuman at least, as a servant of Ram. And that's very commonly known. Very commonly known.
Raj, you said that the Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes are very deep,
Yeah.
but I don't have the ability or bhakti or intelligence to understand the depth of the
But
pastimes.
you and Vrindavan Das Thakur as well, saying the same thing. Me too. That's okay. You have good company.
How can one get to that stage of understanding?
Well, by association with those that have that understanding. That's how Raghunath Das received his understanding, by associating with Swarup Damodar, who imparted that understanding, and then he in turn shared it with others. And Krishnadas Kaviraj wrote it. That's how. I was thinking that coming up very soon is Madhavendra Puri's disappearance day. And we read just yesterday, chapter 9, we read that Madhavendra Puri, this is in Lord Nityananda's chapter, Sri Gaurasundar said again and again that Murari Gupta is the root of spontaneous ecstatic love. So how did that happen? Like, where'd that come from? And it came from Lord Chaitanya. He imparted that into his heart. For the purpose of his pastimes. So if there's some purpose of service for you, or me, or Vrindavan Das, then some realizations will be given. And otherwise, we just associate with those that have great realization and great appreciation. And we hear from them and look up to them and have regard for them. That's how. So don't worry about it. Associate with those that are elevated souls. That's our principle. Sadhu Sangha. One of the associates of Krishna that I like the description of a lot is Muchukunda. Muchukunda was, as a Kshatriya, was really powerful. So powerful, the demigods wanted his help. But he had become a Krishna Bhakta because he heard from Gargamuni that one day he would see Krishna. And just hearing from Gargamuni that one day he would see Krishna, he became a Krishna Bhakta, although he had never seen him. And when he did see him, he didn't recognize him, because in part he was in an angry mood. But when he asked him, "Who are you?" and he told him who he is, a little light went on. So, for pastime purposes, for using, reciprocating with, when you or I or any one of us come to the stage of becoming attached to transcendence, like your wife was asking, when we become attached to Lord Chaitanya or attached to Lord Nityananda or attached to some of the associates of the Lord and meditate, just become absorbed in and attached to them, then that's when doors start opening that are not open right now. This ecstatic love, Madhavendra Puri is the root. So he's a very important person for us. He's the root of ecstatic love, according to what we read yesterday. And Gaurasundar said it again and again. So he and then the other associates. Just yesterday was the appearance day of Ishwar Puri. I meant to mention it, now I'm mentioning it. And Ishwar Puri similarly. It says, we read it, when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave mercy to Ishwara Puri. And the commentary says he received initiation. Normally we speak the other way. Received the mercy of Ishwara Puri. He gave mercy to Ishwara Puri. I mean, and there's some detail. He leaned over and whispered the mantra that he wanted, which means he initiated Ishwara Puri. And then Ishwara Puri gave him the mantra that he wanted. But, Ishwara Puri understood, because Ishwara Puri was a very advanced Vaishnava. So it was a function he was playing in behalf of the Supreme Lord's pastime, so he gave him mantra. So it's very profound. It's not ordinary. It looks ordinary to some degree, but it's not ordinary. It's pastimes. So how to understand things that are transcendental. We're way down here. It's by mercy. We can understand. That's exactly what's said repeatedly. Almost every chapter, beginning and middle and end. He says, who can understand? Only one who gets the mercy. So make ourselves qualified to get mercy. What's that? Become attached. And how are you going to be attached if you're attached to the temporary? You have to become, gradually increasing attachment to the transcendence, and by that detach from the temporary. You're still doing the worldly things, but without attachment. That's, as the bhakti creeper evolves, that transitions phase is uncomfortable, but it's part of what the transition phase is. Still doing duties, but without the same attachment they had before spiritual awakening. We continue with the spiritual awakening and cleansing process till it becomes more and more and more and more and more. And then we'll start to understand more and more because we're eligible to have that mercy. Because of singular vyavasayatmika buddhi, or mam chayo vyabhacharina bhakti yogena sevate. So, at least morning and evening. Krishna conscious sandwich, morning, evening.
Thank you, Maharaj. I was also just one comment. I was appreciating the way you said that there is two realities. There is a higher reality. There is a reality that which we are moving around. But our life is, our background is that moving into that higher reality. Even though we are doing things externally here, so I really like that meditation. Thank you, Maharaj.
That's the bhakti. Perform prescribed duties and always think of me. How do you always think of Krishna? Like somebody asked, when you're doing a math calculation, how do you always think of Krishna? By attachment. Otherwise you can't. That's another kind of always remembering than, the worldly kind. Online? Okay, let's do online. We'll circle back. We'll give them some time to. The online people feel neglected if we don't. So to do some online, then we'll come back.
This is from Amara Mataji. Hare Krishna Maharaj. What is a good point to start introducing new people to Lord Chaitanya? I mean, which book to read, and how do we introduce the Lord to people who do not know anything about him?
Depends on your new people. It may be better to start them with Science of Self-Realization and Bhagavad Gita and, ABC stuff. So that's my response. No, because it's Gaur Purnima, we may want to have them understand. So perhaps from Science of Self-Realization, I can't remember, there must be some sections where selected articles or back to Godhead articles or lectures or something are transcribed, and who is Lord Chaitanya is identified. Bhaktivinoda Thakur wrote Sri Chaitanya, His Life and Precepts. That's maybe another place to begin for people. There's a little PDF that a devotee named Sutapa from the Bhaktivedanta Manor just put together, and for this, that's another. If you don't have a copy, ask Prema Tarangini, because I sent her a copy. No, she sent me a copy. Sutapa from Bhaktivedanta Manor. It's a 47-page kind of summary of Chaitanya Charitamrita. And it's not deep, it's not detailed, but whether that's a suitable text for new people to take a look at, I don't know. If the language is more academic than colloquial.
It has no feedback. Well, this way? Okay. Hare Krishna Maharaj. Thank you for the class. So, the question I had was about the renunciation we were talking. So, some of the associates of Lord Chaitanya...
Take the mask down because it's muffled. Some of the associates of Lord Chaitanya...
They were very renounced, like super renounced, to the extent that if we do it, then we cannot survive.
That's right.
But it also says that they were very blissful, very happy.
Yeah.
Super happy, and we don't experience that.
Yeah.
So my question is the renunciation a symptom of their happiness?
Well, you could say it's a symptom of their happiness, or it's two peas in the same pod. That is, because of their internal happiness, the external detachment is strong. It's same as the Bhagavad Gita message. When there's trying to become Vishaya Vinivartante Nirahasya Dehinam Rasovarjam Sopyasya. So when there's higher taste, and detachment naturally follows. Is it a product of that higher taste or happiness? Yes. However, would it, if there's nothing else involved in this, then those who are most renounced are the most happy. Those that are less renounced are less happy. So I don't think that's a good appraisal. Then, the description, I'm thinking specifically of Sudama Brahman. The description of Sudama Brahman was, he was so skinny that the veins of his body were bulging out of his skin. But the commentary says there are two kinds of renunciation, and his was, he just really liked it. But that doesn't mean that he was more blissful than, somebody else. Because he was so renowned, that means he's more blissful than somebody else, than Uddhava or something. So there's different natures, in other words.
So someone like Pundrik Vidyanidhi, he externally not renounced, but
Yes.
internally equally.
Yes.
Something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Like Bhaktivinoda with, his situation, or Pundrik Vidyanidhi in his situation, or Dvaitacharya in his situation, because he had opulence.
Mhm. Yeah.
Or, keep going. Yudhisthira, Ambarish Maharaj, he wasn't really happy because he had a lot of opulence. So that's not a one-to-one measure.
Hmm.
There's different relationships and different exhibitions of relationships with, moods of love. between the devotee and the Lord, and it's going to look different. Raghunath Das was more ecstatic, had more bliss than all the other 5 Goswamis, because he was more renounced outwardly. That's not a right way to look at things. That's not that you're saying that, but it's not a one-to-one correlation. There's relationships and different modes of loving exchange with different devotees, and it's going to look different.
Thank you.
Online? Anything? No? Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai.